But Peter Alber will now describe the approach to transportation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Peter Albert from MTA. Would like to give a little bit of a step back, if I could, on the transportation planning that's gone on with this project. There's two ways that I've been involved from urban planning initiatives at MTA on this project. One is to help advise the project sponsor on what really matters to MTA, to make sure that if they're talking about changing the transportation system, that we have our own priorities, we have our own responsibilities. We need to be more reliable, we need to be more efficient as a transit system. We also have the bicycle and pedestrian and traffic management responsibilities as well. So the shape of the projects that are being proposed by the project sponsor do reflect and represent the input from the right teams at MTA. We went through a variety of interagency meetings to make sure that we had the vetting of DPW, of PUC, of a variety of city departments and agencies we need to work with to build a good transportation system. What I'm going to talk about today is an even more important step back, and it's the opportunity to take a look at the 19th Avenue corridor, bigger and beyond the scope of Parkmerced. And this was an initiative that was proposed and sponsored by Supervisor Sean Ellsburn. And he gave us the mandate and the responsibility and the opportunity to really take a look and see what would happen to this corridor, not just around Parkmerced, but pretty much between the city limits of Daly City all the way up to Sloat. Knowing what we know about the proposed developments that are happening there, knowing what we know about the transportation improvements we propose as city agencies, and then layering them together to see what we get. So, a quick background on this corridor study. The area covered in the study is really what you see sort of outlined in that pinkish color, but our analysis went beyond that and covered everything that's shown in green. What we looked at was the major developments you'll be hearing me talk about included San Francisco State University. They just recently got a master plan approval. We worked with the numbers we were getting for 800 Brotherhood Way, for 77 Camden Drive. At the time, these were active projects. Ardenwood, Stonestown had come before with a proposal earlier, but we took their numbers and put them into the mix because we wanted to make sure if we had the most development scenario we could really assess the impacts and opportunities. San Francisco Unified School District School of the Arts site was also included. The Balboa Park Cragen site, we put that in there because Ocean Avenue ends up being an important part of this whole system. And of course, Parkmerced. So looking at all these developments and putting them on the radar screen, we proposed to study this in 5 different tiers. And the first, what would happen to 19th Avenue corridor if none of these big developments came through? What would just happen by background growth over time between now and 2030? Because we know, as we saw earlier, that the trend shows more traffic, more congestion, and that's a big concern for Muni because it's a lot harder for Muni to operate on a corridor that's getting more and more congested. We have a hard enough time as it is keeping our headways. Imagine what happens when we have intervening traffic. So we had to pay attention to what would happen if nothing was proposed. Then we layered on top of that, what if we took the numbers that were represented by these projects, Stonestown, San Francisco State, Parkmerced, not necessarily the particular transportation improvements they proposed, but just the numbers in terms of jobs, housing, and layered that onto the background. What would then happen to 19th Avenue and the corridor? We take it another step and we say now the city has a series of proposals we want to see to help sort of solve some of these transportation problems. We know that there's the Transit Effectiveness Project that has some very, very clear proposals for transit improvements there. We know Caltrans has been working closely with the city and county on traffic safety and traffic calming issues on 19th Avenue. We have our own traffic calming program within MTA. We have our bike plan. We have all of these pieces that we were going to be proposing anyway. We layered that on top of the first 2 tiers to see what kind of efficiencies and improvements they brought to it. Tier 4 then is the next layer of projects. Those are the projects that are represented by the developments that I outlined. For instance, in Parkmerced, you saw the proposal of bringing the streetcar into the heart of Parkmerced. That ends up representing some real improvements for pedestrian access, for safety. It also raises some issues that we at MTA are concerned about. If you're adding to the length of the streetcar system, does it mean that it actually takes longer to travel through that? But we also looked at other opportunities as well. For instance, a very important feature is the ability to take a streetcar that might have a problem, a mechanical problem, and get it out of the way on a tail track. You see that as one of the proposals here, so that we continue to through-line our trains without having one train jam up the system. So there's technical features we've added here that help us improve our operation. There are ridership benefits. There are pedestrian and bicycle and traffic safety improvements. But there are also concerns that we had to manage with Tier 4. And then finally, Tier 5. Knowing what we know about Tiers 1 through 4, we as the city agencies and Caltrans and even BART are sitting down to say, now we've got this analysis. We know what's not working that well. We know what's working a lot better. What would be the best possible transit package or transportation package to tie up in all of this? If we see that there's some congestion problems at this intersection, because our analysis shows it, if we saw Parkmerced projects over here did this, what could happen a half mile up 19th Avenue that really makes this whole system come together better? That's what we're calling Tier 5, and it's that extra step that we can take to really clean up the whole transportation proposals for the entire corridor and make it all work better. Now, what I'd like to do is walk you through some of the analysis we saw. For instance, in Tier 2, this is what happens if we add the growth that the projects represent to the corridor. Let's see what we have here. Back. The projects that we're talking about are Parkmerced, San Francisco State. They're listed there on the side. If we start to identify the intersections that have challenges with Tier 2, we also represent some improvements in Tier 3. Here I'm showing some of the traffic calming improvements that are showing up in green, in orange, the roadway improvements that are showing up in green. The blue circles indicate intersections along Highway 1 that Caltrans is working with us to develop that help improve safety and help improve efficiency on the corridor. This is the transit package that goes along with Tier 3. First you saw roadway, now this is transit. These are the transit proposals that came out of the TEP. So now we're layering traffic, roadway, bicycle, pedestrian, and transit together to come up with a better set of packages. And then Tier 4, the projects that you saw presented earlier, the streetcar coming into the project, but also some of the intersection improvements, pedestrian improvements, the ability for people to walk from their home to local neighborhood services. That ends up being a transportation improvement because you help people have a safer path to run errands, to do the trips that normally take a car, but you also help deal with safety. You're designing a safer road network for pedestrian safety. If you talk to anybody on 19th Avenue who has to cross it, you'll hear over and over again how severe the safety and congestion and transit concerns are. Now, a little bit about the streetcar routing through Parkmerced. This is the proposal. I worked really closely with the Muni engineers on this proposal. You see that what we've done is we've taken the M-Ocean view, which runs right now through the middle of 19th and Junipero Serra, and brought it to the front door of Parkmerced. We also added a tail track, which allows us two things. It allows us to take a damaged car or a car that's having problems out of the track, but it also helps us point to Daly City BART, because as mentioned earlier, it is a long-range plan for MTA to bring that streetcar right to Daly City BART. There are thousands of people a day who use the 19th Avenue corridor and arrive on BART, and Daly City is the closest station, but the challenges of being able to walk or bike or even make a transit connection are great. Looking at the analysis that the study has shown, though, I'd like to walk through some of the intersection issues, because when we're measuring these, right away we start measuring with level of service analysis. What happens at the intersections? Do they become more congested? How congested are they? This study has been really informative for us to see that this is the existing situation out there in the 19th Avenue corridor. The circles represent different things. The ones that are fully colored have greater intersection congestion problems. Half-colored, less so. Clear means that they don't really have a significant intersection problem. What I'm going to do is walk you through these successive layers. When you layer growth on top of it, then when you layer the transportation projects on top of that, what happens with the intersections? So Tier 1, if there was just no development but background growth alone, already you start to see outlined in black are the intersections that get worse over the current situation. With Tier 2, when we layer on top of that the growth that's represented with these projects, you see that there's a change. I'll toggle back and forth. Tier 1, Tier 2, new intersections pop up as having problems. New congestion levels arise at different intersections. Okay, so you see that. Now I'm going to add Tier 3. And with our own improvements we see that there are some changes, Tier 2 here, Tier 3 here. There are changes that this 19th Avenue corridor study doesn't pick up that deal with quality of life improvements. For instance, the traffic calming represents safer pedestrian connections for people. Traffic bulbs, slower traffic, they don't necessarily measure as intersection levels of failure, but they do measure as quality of life improvements. Tier 4, there's a big difference here between Tier 3 and Tier 4. By opening new intersections, especially at Parkmerced, you actually diminish the amount of traffic at any one intersection, and you allow it to spread itself out. And what you have is one intersection that went, Tier 3, you see there's a red circle there by the Lake Merced representing, I think it's Higuera, that's the intersection with problems. By introducing new intersections, none of those intersections reach that level of failure because you're allowed to disperse pedestrians, bicycles, and cars through there. You also see the same thing happening at the southeast corner of Parkmerced. I'll go back to Tier 3, right there by Brotherhood Way, it's red. With Tier 4, by allowing other entrance points to the project, you've actually diminished the congestion at that intersection. This is all well and good for me as a transportation planner, understanding what I have to work with. What I'm really interested in doing, though, is making sure that none of these projects preclude our ability to get all the way to Tier 5, that hopefully all those red circles become green, that hopefully the transit reliability issues that we're working with improve. And I want to focus on these intersections because I see that when you get from Tier 1 to Tier 4, there are already some improvements that start to kick in. For instance, in the morning, the Tier 1, where there's just background growth, represented 11 intersections with unacceptable levels of service. Tier 2 and 3 worsened after 13. It goes back to 11 with Tier 4. So already some of the projects proposed by the developer have started to address it. In the afternoon, Tier 1 background growth was 15. It got all the way up to 20 under Tier 2 and 3 by putting some of these projects in. We got it back to 19. And then the weekend, which is interesting to see the level of service changes in the weekend, they indicate that because Parkmerced really is behind most of the transportation improvements under Tier 4, that the issues that remain with congestion are farther away from Parkmerced, which is a very important footnote for me. If I'm trying to get to Tier 5 and make these bigger improvements, I need to look beyond Parkmerced, up around Slope Boulevard, down by the Daly city limit. Where are the opportunities for me to get the intersections that even Parkmerced can't help us address because it's beyond their property? So Tier 5, it is a very important process for us. We're already underway. We've had our kickoff meeting with these agencies, the Authority, BART, Caltrans, our agency at MTA, the Planning Department. We're really pulling the right people together to say, knowing what we know now with this data, where do we go next? We want to work with the community, first of all. I've been to one community meeting already, and I'm going out to the Merced Extension Triangle Neighborhood Association next week to make sure we get the right kind of input from the people who live there and live these problems every day. So they're going to help us shape Tier 5. The next thing we do, we need to establish the certainty between the commitments that are really happening from the city agencies, all these things we think are great ideas, all the projects that we see coming from the project sponsors, and we need to lock them down and make sure that they're real. We don't really have a foundation to stand on to make this better unless there's some real certainty established as our baseline. Then we need to refine these solutions. As we get them all on the table, what are the best solutions that emerge that, looking project by project, we can't see, but by putting them all together in one quarter, they become obvious to us. And then this is very important. Where we can be most successful is we can leverage. These are big fixes that we need to know. We've already got a few good ideas of what they are. But if we have a commitment from the private sector, and we have a commitment from my sister agencies that these are projects we can build, we have a local match. If we have community support, and they're helping us shape these projects, we have community support, local match, private sector, local match, community support. They score terrifically big when it comes to getting grants. I'm actually going to skip ahead to show you a very important slide. Oh, what happened? No. Oh, there's supposed to be a map. Let me go back then. There you go. What I want to talk about is this area here that's outlined in red. I'll use that map. We've worked with the region to make sure that we're in a good spot to get regional funding and federal funding. To do that, the region asked us to define an area that says, where are you as a city and county focusing on development that will be transit-oriented and working closely with the community? If you can identify that area, If you put that into what's called a PDA and you offer that up to the region and you do your homework and show there's community support, you are at the front of the line for getting regional funding. You'll hear about that with Eastern Neighborhoods. You'll hear about that with the Hunters Point and Shipyard Project. You'll hear about that with Market Octavia. These are efforts that have gone through a community review process and committed to transit-oriented development. They are at the front of the line for MTC to get regional funding. About a year and a half ago, we added this project to that list at the region to make sure that if you're within that red area and you're proposing a project and you have great transportation problems, pedestrian safety, congestion, by defining yourself this way, you have access to this money. And then they ask us to make sure that you have local agency cooperation. Check. We're doing that through Tier 5. That you have a local match. We would round up all of our private contributions and our public contributions and check that off the list. And you're working closely with the community on defining what these are. And that's why I'm here today, and that's why you will see me at future community meetings. This is our opportunity to make sure that we are planning not just to get us out of a transportation bind, but planning to get the best access to the dollars, the federal and regional dollars, to help us build our way out of this process. So, when I say leverage, it's not just money. It's leveraging political support, it's leveraging community support, it's leveraging a long-range vision to make this work better. And then finally, with that, we can truly outline an implementation strategy. We can start talking about phasing. We can start talking about funding. It's not pie in the sky. It's based in reality, based in certainty. And then the last step, of course, implement the projects. So, new ideas are coming up. We've already heard already. We know, for instance, I'll be very open about this. MTA would like to see the M Ocean View extended to Daly City BART. We're working with BART on that. We would like to see the M Ocean View on the west side of 19th Avenue. We hear about it loudly and clearly from people. 95% of the people getting off that streetcar want to walk to the west side, whether it's Stonestown State or Parkmerced. But 100% of those people have to cross 19th Avenue. So we're it's a very compelling idea that we take that streetcar and put it where most people go. But for the people who do walk across 19th Avenue, we have to make sure we accept traffic calming, sidewalk bulbs, and manage traffic flow so it's always safe to cross. Those are two very real ideas that are in the works. So intersection improvements, communicating signals, countdowns, smart technology to help us know exactly when the train's coming and let that train move through the signal sequence. West Side Muni, the one here that's outlined below grade Muni, this came from our own engineers. What if the M Ocean View never had to cross 19th Avenue at the surface? What if it went under or over 19th Avenue at the key points? If you know Eucalyptus, you know around Randolph, there's a long time and a long delay both for drivers and transit riders where the streetcar has to merge its way into traffic. This is the right time to start laying out what it takes to allow that grade-separated crossing to happen. By doing that, it actually makes 19th Avenue safer to cross on foot because you don't need to have the time and delay to allow the streetcar to cross. You actually have a much calmer street, and the transit riders get the preference of riding without even having to stop through the 19th Avenue corridor. And then, of course, extending Muni to BART. These are real. This is only a tip of the iceberg of the projects we're starting to identify. But if I were to wrap this up with any one point, it is we need the certainty of tiers 1 through 4 to help us get to tier 5. So I want to work closely with you and make sure that we really scope out what these projects represent and how I can have a stable footing to help really make this corner of the city work better.
Thank you.
Sophie Hayward, planning staff. And at this point in the presentation, we were going to pause and see if there are any questions or comments from the commissioners before we move on with the design portions.
Okay.
I'm going to wait. Somebody else wants to go ahead. Go ahead.
Commissioner Moore?
Isn't 19th Avenue state route, Highway 1? What do you have to do to convince the state of California to work with you? Because it is not just a city transaction, it is indeed a state transaction.
You're absolutely right on. Peter Albert again from SFMTA. We've already met with Caltrans at District 4 headquarters in Oakland, laid out what we're trying to do. They are very interested in improving safety on 19th Avenue. They have a vested interest in making sure it's a safer street and a better managed street. So we've had them participate with the Tier 5 kickoff, but we also are working with them on a future PSR. That's an analysis to make sure that if we're actually changing the configuration of 19th Avenue, their engineers are vetting the changes, making sure that they sign off on them, and it's an iterative loop. We give them our proposal, they give us their technical realities we have to incorporate, and then we wrap it up in a proposal, and that's underway right now, too.
Second part of my question addresses the same basic dialogue between state and city. Having a grade separated crossing will also fall within their jurisdiction because you are basically using either above or below grade easements. From a gateway perspective and the boulevard, which I saw rendered out as part of the gateway idea, an undercrossing would be desirable to an overcrossing because the city currently or even within the last 20 years does not like overcrossings. Have you done any design investigations? Have you done anything to take the gateway idea into a reasonable discussion about undercrossings?
So, yeah, I should be clear. Excuse me for not making this clear earlier. We're designing the project right now for surface crossings. We've actually met with PUC, state PUC, because of their specific requirements. When you have a streetcar cross full 19th Avenue as opposed to half 19th Avenue, what are their metrics? What are their safety standards? We then ask them about the grade separated idea, and we want to work with them to make sure we know what their criteria is because of their responsibility as the manager of the state highway system. There are specific concerns they have when you talk about an overcrossing or an undercrossing. And then, of course, you are interested, you are right, we are interested in making sure that we manage the aesthetic and other policy issues about future grade crossings, whether they're over or under, including an overcrossing.
And then on the transportation piece, I really like the idea of moving the Muni to the west side, because even crossing half of 19th Avenue is a real challenge. And whether you might as well just cross the whole thing. I'm on the east side. I'm one of that small percentage of people who come from the east, but most of them do come from the west, particularly the students and the residents over there. And yeah, the tunnel is a great idea to go under 19th and also going out the other way. So you've got it in its own right of way. And the Daly City extension is a great idea.
And if I could, just to clarify, there's no tunnel proposed in the Parkmerced project. I want to make sure that people understand what I need is to make sure that what is being proposed points to that direction. It would be a real problem for us, I think, as city agencies, if we had the wrong transportation system in place and we had to not only undo what was done, but we had to go back to square one. Where I'm really looking to work with the project sponsor and the community is to make sure that everything they're proposing points to and allows for that future improvement that we all think is so important.
Yeah, no, I think we're clear that the tunnel is at 19th. It's not within the development itself. That's surface level. And then there might be another tunnel where you exit out. You mentioned Randolph. I'm not sure once you go back into the rest of the Ocean View, you said there might be another tunnel crossing 19th the second time.
Or another crossing of some sort.
Some kind of a crossing of some kind. There is some space there with, where Brotherhood is and some other things that might be able to be done creatively to take advantage of some of the space that exists that is underutilized now. There's little right-of-way, that is not part of the Brotherhood Way itself, so that may be a possibility.
May 11th at Metna, please join us with your ideas. I want to make sure I'm adding those to the list of projects coming from the community.
Okay, where are you going to be on May 11th?
It's the Metna neighborhood meeting, I believe. Palmetto. It's the Palmetto Community Meeting Center, right off Alamany.
Okay.
And I think it's at 6 o'clock. 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock on Palmetto. Okay, thank you.